Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm your host, Trudy Stern, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have with us once again my friend, Congressman Mike Lawler, representing New York's 17th District. The last time he joined us was before the elections, and so much has happened since then. Congressman Lawler secured a significant victory over Democrat Mondaire Jones, a testament to the trust and confidence his constituents have in his leadership. Only a few months into his second term, and since taking office, he's made a tremendous impact already, serving on two critical committees, Committee on Financial Services and the prestigious Committee on Foreign Affairs. And within that, he's been appointed as chair of the highly influential Mideast and North Africa Subcommittee. But what truly sets Congressman Lawler apart is his tireless dedication to championing the issues that matter most. He has been incredibly active sponsoring critical legislation, including the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which passed the Senate. And he is one of the most bipartisan members. His unwavering support for Israel and the Jewish people, both in the US and abroad, is not just talk. It's backed by real action. Congressman Lawler, we are so happy to have you back. I can't wait to dive into all that has happened since you were here last.
Well, thanks for having me, Trudy. Look forward to the conversation.
So before we get to the actual committee which you said on, which I really like to hear all about, I just want to touch base about what happened at Columbia University last night. You've been highly active on college campuses, and you actually just introduced the Endowment Accountability Act, punishing. If you could actually explain that to our listeners, but last night at Columbia University, there was a huge sit-in by the Students for Justice of Palestine, where they closed down one of the buildings. They did not allow the Jewish students to enter. They closed down classes, and the administration and the campus security didn't allow the Jewish students to enter the building or stage a counter protest. What could be done in this, in light of all the things that you have introduced with regard to colleges?
Look, again, there's a lot of steps that both Congress can take, but that these school administrators have to take. Their top priority is to ensure the safety and well-being of these students, and that requires action. Ultimately, yes, kids have a right to protest. People have a right to engage in free speech. They have a right to, have a free exchange of ideas. But the moment you start threatening someone else's physical safety or, infringing upon their rights, that becomes a problem. These are private institutions, and the schools have a responsibility to not only uphold federal law, but they have a responsibility to act. And the failure to do so should engender consequences. And that's why we need to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act to enforce Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and make sure that anti-Semitism is defined using the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. In addition, I think we need to take concrete steps with respect to the funds. Number one, I have a bill that would strip away all federal dollars from these institutions if they promote or sanction anti-Semitic events, like we saw, obviously, in this instance, as well as taxing the endowments at a much greater percentage, 10%, as well as what President Trump did with the executive order going after students that are here on visas. You are not entitled to be here. This is a privilege to come to the United States and get educated here. And if you're going to engage in these types of protests, we're going to revoke your visa. So that's something that I think, there's some significant steps that can and should be taken.
Well, the Endowment Accountability Act, which you just introduced, is that specifically designed to, is it designed to punish schools that are not acting properly, or is it to just tax them whether they are or not?
Well, the bill itself is introduced because the 1.4% endowment tax, in my estimation, is too low. Number one. Number two, it's about affordability in part because the colleges and universities are not using their endowments to the fullest. They're not making sure that they are in fact using their endowments to support these students. And I think number three, the objective is to force behavioral change because at the end of the day, money forces change. And we've seen time and again how these institutions, because they're so heavily reliant on federal dollars, they're so reliant on donor dollars, they're so reliant on the endowments. The objective is to force change. So, certainly as we negotiate along the way, as we negotiate along the way, the objective is to make sure, that we force change here in these universities and colleges.
So since we spoke last, we spoke in October, so much has happened. The Republicans took the Senate and the White House, and you kept the House. So, first of all, you're now into your second term, and is there a big difference between first and second with regard to what has happened in the election? So that's part one, and then I'd love to hear about the Mideast and North Africa Subcommittee, of which you've been named chair, which is such a huge honor.
So, I mean, between the first and second term, the big difference obviously is that we control the Senate and the White House now. And so, in some respects, it's obviously it's a lot easier to start advancing the agenda that, we ran on and won on. But, by and large, the job itself hasn't demonstrably changed. It's just a function really of the ability to get certain things across the finish line. So we're working through the reconciliation bill now, which will focus on border security, strengthening the military, increasing domestic production of energy, reining in the size and scope of the federal government. And then, of course, providing tax relief to millions of hardworking middle-class families all across our country. So, that is right now the immediate focus of what we're trying to get done in Washington. As a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and now chair of the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee, my focus is obviously on the issues impacting the Middle East, from Iran and its terror proxy network to normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and fostering greater economic cooperation among countries throughout the region, and really working with our allies to contain the threats and stop the illicit oil trade, stop Iran's nuclear program, et cetera. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and that's what we're focused on.
Do you feel that the environment is more favorable to Israel? And with regard to Iran, do you think Israel will have the support? I know you spoke about this in the past, reining in Iran and making sure they don't become nuclear. So do you feel that right now America will give the support to Israel if they were to choose to take out their nuclear program?
I think obviously the U.S. and Israel need to work very closely on this. I think we want to make sure that the threat is eliminated. It's not something certainly that would telegraph out, but I think the objective has to be to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. We've seen their willingness to use missiles against Israel. We've seen what they have done to fund terrorism targeted at Israel. And so, this is going to be I believe, a very important decision point over the next, year to determine the best way to eliminate the threat.
What do you see happening in Gaza? What's a realistic outcome?
Well, I think, this is where President Trump is certainly forcing conversation in the Middle East. I think it's going to be important for the Arab states to come together and come up with a plan that the United States and Israel can support. But it has to be Arab-led, I think, to provide a lasting solution here. And I think they're all going to have to play a role and all have to be part of the solution to finally bring about peace and stability and shared prosperity in the Middle East. The current construct doesn't work, and so long as Hamas or the Palestinian Authority or some similarly situated group is in charge, I think it's going to be very hard to have a peaceful solution there.
I read just yesterday that that Hamas is actually rearming, and that all of these prisoners that are getting out, I think one of the prisoners actually is taking over head of the Fatah. And I mean, how do you contain that? How does America plan on helping Israel to contain that imminent threat?
Well, this is always the challenge when you're negotiating, with a terrorist group and trying to get the hostages out. They obviously are pushing for a release of their members and people who are sympathetic to their cause in return. And this is something that obviously we're going to have to continue to monitor as we work to get the last remaining hostages out and bring them home to their families. And so certainly, we'll continue to support Israel, make sure they have the weapons they need, to not only deter any future attack, but ensure that they have the ability and the capabilities to protect themselves proactively.
Do you think that it's realistic that Saudi Arabia will normalize and join the Abraham Accords with Israel?
Yes, I do. I think I feel confident that will happen. It's just a function of time and working through the current situation.
So you are an unbelievably bipartisan member of Congress, maybe the most bipartisan. And because of that, you've been so successful in getting pieces of legislation out to the floor and actually passed. So how do you do that? I mean, that's very unusual, and it seems like it's a highly partisan group. How do you manage to do that?
I think the key on that is to not only build consensus and bipartisan support, but work with leadership and the committee chairs to advance the legislation and walk through the importance of it and why it matters to a broader population of Americans. And I'm proud of the fact that last Congress we passed 11 bills, 6 of which were signed into law. I think there's great opportunity here to advance important legislation, but it takes time. You got to work through the proper channels, and you got to build consensus both within the conference and the Congress to get major legislation accomplished.
Well, I think that's so much to your credit, being that you're from New York, which is a overwhelmingly Democratic state, and yet you're you won your seat, your seat a second time, where a few of the other Republican seats lost. So I think the fact that you're able to work across the aisle is so much to your credit. So it brings me to my next question, which is, we've seen this all over. So I've actually seen rumors, heard rumors, that you might be running for governor of New York. Is that true? Would you like to talk to our listeners about that?
We're certainly, in the process of evaluating whether or not that's something we'll do. I've gotten a lot of encouragement from folks across the state, and it's something again that we're taking into consideration. We have a lot of challenges in New York. One-party Democratic rule in Albany for the last 7 years has created a disaster in our state. We lead the nation in outmigration. We have the highest tax burden, the worst business climate. The quality of life has declined because of crime and the migrant crisis. And people are tired of it. They want balance and common sense. And so it's something we'll look at, make a decision sometime this year. But the objective is to make sure that, ultimately we have a strong ticket and, win up and down ballot.
Are there a lot of people who are considering primarying you on the Republican side? I know that there's a lot of people who are considering running on the Democratic side, but I didn't see anything on the Republican side.
I don't know yet kind of how it'll play out, and the process will unfold. My view on it is, we need to have a strong candidate one way or the other. And so, people will go through their own process and determine whether or not it's something they want to do. Ultimately, I think we need to avoid a primary if, regardless of who it is, because as we saw with Lee Zeldin, it squandered precious resources and time. And, the focus has to be on winning the general election. So we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, people will make their determinations along the way.
Well, Congressman Lawler, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights on so many critical issues. Your perspective and dedication and to the challenges facing our nation are really valuable, and we appreciate your time. We hope you'll come back again as events continue to unfold. To my listeners, thank you for tuning in and being part of this conversation. Make sure to tune in every Thursday night at 9:30 for another episode of Nothing But the Truth. If you missed any part of tonight's show or want to catch up on past episodes, you can find them wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Trudy Stern. Truth matters. Freedom depends on it. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.